Karabo, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Georgia.
Now, as we understand it, Parliament's Joint Standing Committee on Intelligence have gone ahead and conducted a very important interview, but the panel has gone and done this interview process in secret. Now, what we're going to talk about today is a little bit complicated, so if you would start us off, won't you just explain to us what the Joint Standing Committee on Intelligence does and what this particular position they were interviewing for is?
Absolutely. So, Jerusha, as you are aware, and I'm sure the viewers are also aware, Parliament has a number of committees which are supposed to perform an oversight role into our different democratic institutions. And one of those institutions are our various intelligence agencies, and so that includes our State Security Service, our South African Secret Service, and so forth. We've got a particular committee which consists of both members of our National Assembly as well as members of our provincial legislature, hence the name the Joint Standing Committee, because it's got a mixed membership, unlike some committees which have only got members from the National Assembly. What happens, and this is in accordance to our Intelligence Oversight Act, which was written up in 1994, is that the Joint Standing Committee has got the responsibility to appoint somebody who is known as our Inspector General of Intelligence, who is essentially a public ombudsman to ensure that if there are any complaints or concerns about, be it corrupt practices within our intelligence agencies, or perhaps if a citizen feels that they're being unfairly monitored or there's some dubious surveillance activity on their work, or if a citizen or perhaps civil society feels that there needs to be further investigation into the activities of our intelligence service, the public ombudsman, so the Inspector General, is supposed to then follow up on these matters. So anybody can submit a complaint or query to the Inspector General. And the Inspector General also has a very privileged role, because unlike most citizens, the Inspector General has got the ability to oversee all of the work of our intelligence agency. So essentially, this is an incredibly powerful role, because for services that generally operate under a confidential structure, the Inspector General can actually provide a very powerful means of oversight to ensure that the kind of corrupt practices or political factionalism which is capturing our intelligence services doesn't remain the same.
So, Karabo, won't you speak to us then about the importance of the appointment of this particular person being a transparent and an open process, and of course we know that hasn't happened.
Absolutely. But what's interesting, Jerusha, is that in 2009, the committee broke with its general secretive practice and chose to make this appointment process open to public scrutiny. However, since then, we've seen that has shut down. And so the committee has got a very significant role in that it is allowed to make a recommendation to our National Assembly on who the proposed candidate. And I'm just giving the process to understand again why it's such a significant process. So the committee has got the ability to make the recommendation based on a short list of who the proposed candidate is, and then National Assembly, based on a 2/3 majority decision, then submits that to the President, and the President makes the final decision on who should be the Inspector General. Now, we have, when I say we, so a number of public interest organizations have been following the process since the announcement of the appointment of the new Inspector General. The current Inspector General, who goes by the name of Faith, his term is going to come to an end on the 31st of March this year. So the committee has been tasked to appoint a new Inspector General. Her term is going to come to an end, and therefore the committee was tasked to appoint a new Inspector General. And so the moment we found out about this, we ourselves, the Right to Know campaign, wrote a letter asking for the process to be an open one, given the extreme public interest in this particular process. We didn't receive a strong response, and we did receive a response. The chair lady of the committee said to us that a public statement would be issued explaining whether or not the process would be opened, and that never occurred. Another civil society organization, the Institute for Security Studies, then subsequently wrote a letter to the committee saying that although the committee provided a public participation mechanism, and so they invited the public to submit comments on the 8 shortlisted candidates, to say whether there are any concerns or voice their opinions about who should be the candidate. However, this is a very contradictory process because essentially the committee invited the public to comment over a period of 4 days. They only gave us 4 days, or 4 working days. But they did not provide us with any background information on any of the 8 shortlisted candidates. They didn't provide us with any CVs, and so there was no actual capacity of citizens to substantively engage in who the shortlisted candidates were. So essentially what you find in this committee is that rather than choosing to really dialogue and engage the public, one, they have chosen not to respond to critical letters which have been sent to them, and two, although they had a so-called public participation mechanism in their process, the public participation was so, the means by which the public could participate was so weak that it can only be seen as lacking any kind of meaningfulness in the way that it's been undertaken. So, yeah.
Karabo, this comes at a time where South Africans are almost even more aware of intelligence in South Africa, or South Africa's intelligence abroad, certainly after the leaking of the spy cables by Al Jazeera News Network. And in a sense, I think many South Africans, after finding out about this and in the light of those leaked cables, are starting to believe, or starting to certainly see, that our government is keeping a lot from us. Why is this problematic?
Rightly so, Tanisha. I think obviously for the public, the spy cables really highlighted the issue of our secretive intelligence agency. But perhaps what was more critical than just the leaking of the spy cables is what came out of those spy cables. So what some of the information which was leaked showed was that our intelligence agencies had been captured by political factionalism. And so you saw information relating to our intelligence agencies being asked to spy on political opponents, which is not the role of intelligence agencies, for instance. But there's also been other problematic behavior of our agencies. So, for instance, we see our Minister of Intelligence asking for key public figures to investigate, including our public prosecutor for being apparently a part or an agent of the CIA, which is a completely ludicrous claim. However, we have our intelligence agencies now pursuing matters which just lack any basis of reason, and perhaps more problematically, are drawing away critical resources for political and suspects investigations, which shouldn't be the role or the function of our intelligence agencies. We've also had information about, for instance, journalists being approached by our SSA asking for them to leak information about political opponents. There are stories about, again, NUMSA having undue surveillance. There are stories about citizens themselves submitting Inspector General investigation requests asking for their matters to be followed up and having no response in that regard. And so, yes, whilst the spy cables did point to perhaps a breach in the security of our intelligence agencies, what it revealed was perhaps a very problematic culture which is creeping into our various intelligence agencies, where the role and the function has been shifted from ensuring that our democracy is built in an accountable and just way to being interfered with in a very politically motivated way.
Karabo, let's bring this back to the appointment of the Inspector General for Intelligence. Now that the information is out there, or certainly now that South Africans know the way that the process has gone, what do we do? Is it up to us to lobby the Honourable Connie September, who is chairing this interview process? Really, what do South Africans do about this? How do we ensure that our government is more upfront and honest with us?
Absolutely. I think the first thing is to, like you say, ensure that we are well versed about what's happening within our parliamentary structures. And so, as I said earlier, there was an invitation by the committee and by Honourable September for the public to submit comments on the various shortlisted candidates who were shortlisted by the committee. And I think the public should raise their voice and say this process was opened up, but there was no real ground, no meaningful grounds in which we had the ability to participate. As I also said, a number of public interest organizations have been lobbying the committee itself to, one, open up the processes, move away from this culture of secrecy. And I think that the public want to be actively engaged with the partner organizations, or feel free to write to their various parliamentarians and say, we are interested in this process. How can you as a parliamentarian use your vote and use your electoral mandate to influence this process? So, for instance, we know that once the committee itself has concluded the process of recommending the candidates, the recommended candidate will then be forwarded to the National Assembly for a vote in this space, and they can only be appointed on a 2/3 majority from the National Assembly. So again, the public can definitely try and engage in that process to say, we want to ensure that the Inspector General is one who represents the interests of the public rather than very narrow political interests. So I say the public should continue lobbying. There are a number of organizations, including the organization that I'm from, which is Honorable Ndana, who are considering a legal process at this point. And I think it's one, to remain informed about the process, two, realize the significance of this process and not just see it as some minor parliamentary process which is running. But I think also more crucially, we as the public tend to have a perception that just because it's intelligence services, there's a justification for blanket secrecy. And this isn't correct. I think what we need to understand is that intelligence doesn't equate to mean blanket secrecy. Intelligence means a particular use of state resources for very strategic interests. And so the moment we hear the statement that, because it's intelligence, there should be blanket secrecy, or there should be a stamp of confidential and no access to public oversight, we should be standing up and saying no to this. We should be saying that it's within our rights as citizens to have our institutions of state, as well as our intelligence agencies, including our intelligence agencies, which operate in an open and democratic and transparent way. Now, although the committee itself has got a special legislative framework from the Intelligence Oversight Act to conduct its proceedings behind closed doors, the committee itself does have a mandate to make the call when relevant to have those processes opened up to the public as well as the media. And so I think it's understanding what our democratic rights are and not being swayed by a very narrow interpretation of what the committee and intelligence agencies are there for and their functions in our democracy.
Karabo, thank you so much for helping us make sense of this, and we certainly hope we can check in again with you soon to see how this develops.
Thank you so much, Teresa.